This is USVI News, your Virgin Islands connection.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for USVI News. I'm Emily Matson. The USVI continues to navigate COVID in several ways as the health commissioner on Monday expressed concern over COVID positivity rate of just over 3%. This as COVID numbers increase in the nearby British Virgin Islands. Our USVI News' Ali Bourne-Finneck has the latest from Government House.
Emily, there are several updates on COVID from Government House. First, the Commissioner of Health has announced that there are 122 active cases of COVID-19 right now in the territory, 67 on St. Thomas, 54 on St. Croix, and 1 on St. John. The health department is encouraging everybody to stay as safe as possible and vigilant when it comes to COVID. Also, Government House continues to work on a digital vaccine pass. They announced that with the digital vaccine pass, this will allow people who have had the COVID vaccine to not have to produce a negative COVID test when coming back to the territory.
More vaccinated residents are signing up for their digital vaccine record, which, as we mentioned last week, will allow vaccinated residents to securely share their vaccine status with a growing network of local organizations as we move closer to safely reopening businesses and allowing events like Carnival, for example. The digital vaccine record can be carried as a wallet-sized photo or stored on your Apple Wallet or Google Wallet for individuals with smartphones. To request your digital vaccine record, please visit covid19usvi.com/digital pass to start the process. This website is accessible by using your smartphones, for those of you who have smartphones and tablets, and will guide you through the information submission process. There is also a frequently asked questions section where you can learn more about the digital vaccine record or digital vaccination record, so that process is coming along. And like I said, the good news is that you can also vaccinated travelers will also be able to share their vaccination status in our travel portal, and that's something that would allow travelers to return to the territory without needing a negative COVID-19 test. I know we get a lot of questions from residents who are vaccinated on whether or not they still need to take or to get tested to come back into the territory. As of right now, yes, that is still the requirement. But with this new digital vaccination record, you'll be able to soon upload that information into the travel portal, and there will no longer be a need for a negative COVID test entering when traveling into the territory for vaccinated individuals. So I know that's some welcome news for those of you who travel frequently and need to return to the territory.
And more COVID news, there's an update on the vaccine lottery. Government House announced that they just had the drawing on July 9th, and soon they will be announcing the winners. If you've had the vaccine and want to register, you can register for the vaccine lottery at www.vax2winusvi.com. In St. Thomas, Ali Bourne-Finneck, USVI News.
And in terms of vaccinations, 47% of Virgin Islanders are now fully vaccinated. 37,466 people are fully vaccinated with 2 doses, which is 47% of the population. The Virgin Islands Department of Health has administered 45,206 first doses, which is about 57% of the population. The head of the department says we're still about 30% away from reaching community immunity. They're making it as easy as possible to get a vaccine. So to make an appointment, you can call 340-777-VAX or 8227, or you can visit covid19usvi.com/vaccines. Federal health and drug officials say if you have been fully vaccinated, then you do not need a booster shot at this time. The CDC and FDA released a joint statement saying the agencies are engaged in a science-based, rigorous process to consider whether or when a booster may be necessary. However, the agencies say they're prepared if and when the science demonstrates that they are needed, and that those who are fully vaccinated are protected from the severe disease, including variants, right now with just the 2-dose regimen. They released the statement hours after Pfizer announced it would seek authorization for a 3rd dose of its vaccine, saying another shot within 12 months could boost immunity dramatically. Now to some big news across the Caribbean. In Cuba, thousands of people marched across the island protesting the country's food shortages and high prices amid the coronavirus pandemic. Cuba is in the midst of an economic crisis, and these anti-government anti-socialist protests are in the largest that they have seen in decades. Patrick Oppman has more from Havana.
Calling for liberty, protesters take to the streets in Havana. In front of police, the crowd yells, "Fatherland and life," a new opposition slogan that has gotten people who say it in public arrested in Cuba. But Cuba on Sunday seemed a very different place, as thousands of people in cities across the island took to the streets and took the government by surprise. These are the largest mass protests in years, perhaps decades. Usually, any anti-government activity leads to immediate arrest. Protests criticizing the state are simply not allowed here. But on Sunday, though, thousands of people voiced their anger openly, and many people told us they simply had lost their fear. Police surrounded the protesters and arrested some of them, but for the most part, they did not or could not stop the demonstrations. The protests are only the latest sign of the unprecedented crisis facing the communist-run island. Even as Cuba produces its own homegrown vaccines, the number of COVID cases has skyrocketed. On Sunday, health officials announced the highest single-day increase in new cases and deaths. For months, the Cuban economy has spiraled further and further downwards. The island has been hard hit by increased U.S. sanctions under the Trump administration, which have continued under President Biden. The pandemic has cut off tourism and the ability to receive help from relatives abroad for many Cubans. Lines for food now stretch around the block and can last for hours. For many in Cuba, waiting for scarce food and medicines has become their life. Every day, there are people out here for whatever there is. Some days you don't even know what products they're going to be selling, Rachel says. You have to be out here if you want to have food. The economic misery is already leading to desperation, as Cubans are now taking to the sea on rafts in the greatest numbers since 2017, when then President Obama ended the wet foot, dry foot policy that allowed Cubans reaching the U.S. to stay. Cuba is confronting the worst crisis in decades without a Castro at the helm, as Raul Castro stepped down from his last leadership role in April. On Sunday, Cuba's new leader, Miguel Diaz-Canel, blamed the island's economic troubles on the U.S. and vowed to crack down on the protesters. The order to combat has been given, he said. Revolutionaries need to be in the streets. As Cuba edges closer to the edge, neither side appears they are backing down. Patrick Oppman, CNN Havana.
Wow, amazing to see that. Meantime, leaders in South Florida are calling for the Biden administration to help the people of Cuba after those weekend protests erupted across the island. The island suffering through one of its worst socioeconomic crises since the fall of the Soviet Union. As Patrick Oppman mentioned, worsening conditions, including the third wave of the coronavirus, a worrying lack of food, medicine, and other basic products are some of the reasons for these protests. Officials in South Florida, including Miami's mayor, are calling on President Biden as well as the international community to help the people of Cuba realize their dream of freedom and liberty.
It's important that we recognize what is happening in Cuba right now at this very moment. A spontaneous uprising that has never happened in the last 60 years has happened in more than a dozen cities across Cuba. What the government has done is what the government unfortunately has always done for the last 60 years under the Castro regime. They've shut down the internet, they've shut down electricity, and they've gone out to the street to beat and to harm those who are protesting peacefully for freedom and liberty in their country. The United States and the international community must do something now. They need to come together, similarly to how they came together to condemn the acts in Venezuela. The government of Cuba is an illegitimate government, it is not a democratic government, and the people of Cuba are starving. They're in need of medicine, they're in need of international help, and frankly, unless the Cuban military or the Cuban police turns on the Cuban government, the Cuban people will continue to be repressed without any hope of freedom in the future.
President Joe Biden issued a statement to show solidarity with the Cuban people, saying in part the United States calls on the Cuban regime to hear their people and serve their needs at this vital moment rather than enriching themselves.